Hey guys, Fan here, and today I am going to give you guys a early game build guide for Monk Invoker. I'm making this guide because I've been playing Monk Invoker for the past 2 or 3 days of the early access, and I have noticed that the early game for Monk is actually really tough compared to the early game of most other classes. The melee early game in general seems a lot tougher than the ranged early game classes. So I thought I would give you a bunch of tips that I've accumulated that have helped me get through early game a lot easier. And hopefully these tips can help you make your early game monk experience not miserable if you are playing it. And chances are, if you're looking for this video, you've probably experienced some of that misery already. So let's get started. I'm going to break this down into 4 quick sections here. The first section, I'm going to talk about your skills. The second section, we'll talk about what you want to look for on your equipment, what's really important, what's strong. And the third section, we'll talk about your passive tree, your skill tree. And the last section, I'll just give you a little bit of a gameplay tips for what I did in my journey. So let's begin with the skills here. As you can see on the left, we have some skills. Now, I'm just going to go from early game, onwards. You're going to unlock these skills more or less in chronological order on the left here. So, you're starting off with your basic auto attack. Now, this, unfortunately, it's okay, but it's realistically kind of shitty. You have to get in melee range, which means all the monsters are going to be, seconds away from auto attacking you. It's really not the most ideal thing in the game, but it's the only thing you have starting off. So starting off, you're going to use your auto attack and roll, and auto attack and roll, and you basically just have to keep doing that over and over until you unlock some more skills. Now, once you unlock your first tier of skills, you're going to get access to Killing Palm and Falling Thunder. This is going to be your early game cookie cutter combo. And my first tip here that's really important for you is instead of just using your default basic attack, as soon as possible, try to get some ranged attack. Now, this ranged attack could come in many forms. You could find some equipment early game with a ranged spell attached to it. There's lots of wands or staves that you find early game that have a spell attached that's ranged, and you can use that ranged spell and replace your auto attack with it. Now, in the very early levels, the level range for both will be very similar, so they should do very similar amounts of damage, and basically this allows you to become pseudo range with your auto attack, become much safer so that you don't have to face tank the mobs, but instead you can whittle them down from range. And when you get them low, you can dash in with Killing Palm to get a power charge. Right after that, you can just roll out and use Falling Thunder when you have enough power charges to AoE everything down. So this is going to be, a basic early game combo that you can do. And you can also, instead of using, just whatever ranged thing spell you find on the ground, you can also use like a bow. That'll work too. That's also ranged. And you can even use another spell, like for example Glacial Cascade. You can even use this is technically another range spell that you can whittle away with from the safety of range. And that's going to be a much better playstyle than the melee one at the start, because the melee one at the start is basically just auto attack roll, auto attack roll, auto attack roll, and it's really clunky and kind of annoying to do. So keep that in mind. That is pretty nice. Now, once you get a little further along in the game, you're going to unlock your second tier of spells here, and these are a really good combination with Falling Thunder and Tempest Bell. So Falling Thunder is kind of like a lightning quick attack combo that performs a bunch of attacks. Now you're going to combo this onto your Tempest Bell. Tempest Bell, you have to hit a few times before you can unlock it, but as soon as you unlock it, you drop it, you hit the Falling Thunder onto the Tempest Spell, and it's going to do a lot of AoE damage on everything around the bell. It's very powerful. It's very high amounts of both single target damage and AoE damage, with the only downside being you have to be in melee range, so once again it's riskier, have to time your dodges if you're being attacked. But other than that, this is one of the best cookie cutter early game combos, and really it's going to be good later on in the game as well, so make full use of that. Once I get Falling Thunder, I basically replace my auto attack with Falling Thunder. It does have a higher higher mana cost, but you can kind of just, use mana potions to account for that. It's really not a big deal. And Falling Thunder attacks quicker than your normal attack as well, which means you can build the combo from Tempest Spell much faster, which means you can use your first Tempest Spell much faster as well. So just all kinds of synergy between these two. You can just use the recommended skill gems. Those are generally already pretty good for the spells. Now, moving on from there, once you get even further, you unlock the next tier of stuff. I generally like the Herald. All the Heralds I think are pretty good. Now, I'm playing a Thunder build myself, so I went Herald of Thunder, but if you're playing more Ice, you can go Herald of Ice, and that one is really good as well. Basically, just a permanent active that gives you extra damage, extra CC in the case of the Ice one as well. Really nice. And I also unlocked Storm Wave. Storm Wave is really nice as well. It's basically an AoE ranged attack, which once again, following the theme, allows you to kind of stay safe from ranged and take much less damage from, just not being in the middle of all these packs of monsters. So those are the skills that I used most of the time. Those are the cookie cutter ones. I do have Staggering Palm, Vaulting Impact here as well. Staggering Palm can be nice to stagger bosses. You get an indicator. You just use it when you see the indicator on the bosses. It is pretty decent as well, but I would say these two are not nearly as important as the other ones that I mentioned. The other ones are going to be the cookie cutter ones. So that is what I have for skills. Now let's look at equipment, and I'm going to say what's really important in the early game equipment that you should be looking for. So let's start with your weapons, one of the most important pieces of equipment. Now for the weapon, you're really looking for any source of additional damage. So you can see on my weapon, we have two separate roles actually here of increased physical damage. So Monk uses both physical damage and elemental damage. You're going to do a mix of both, and a lot of your skills are actually going to be kind of, they're going to be converting your physical damage into elemental damage. So increased physical damage is good. It's a very good stat, and generally speaking, you're looking for any kind of additional damage. However, there's a better stat than that, and I think the best stat that you can find on your weapon is plus, in this case it would be 3, but it changes depending on the item level and what you find. So plus some amount to level of all of your skills. That is the number one thing you should be looking for. I think that's by far the number one strongest stat that you can possibly get on your weapon. So if you have a weapon with that trumps all else. Okay, so look for the highest number of plus level to all skills. Now in the case of Monk Invoker, almost every single monk skill is a melee skill. So for this, you're going to be looking for plus levels to melee skills. That's going to be the number one priority on your weapon. And everything else, just look for damage. The more damage rolls it has, the better. Attack speed basically is more damage, right? Physical damage rolls important. Accuracy, not very important. That one's kind of, in my opinion, a bad roll on this weapon. However, everything else is pretty good, right? So fire damage, it could be ice damage, elemental damage. All of those are pretty good as well. And the role of kind of flat damage. So instead of saying a percentage increased damage, it's a flat damage. So the earlier you are, the better flat damage is, in my opinion, because in the early game, your total damage number is going to be pretty low, right? Let's say you're level 1, you're level 2, your total damage might be like 10 physical damage or something, right? So if you're adding 1 to 4 physical damage or 3 to 7 fire damage, that's going to be a lot when you're level 1, but it might not be so much when you're level 30, right? So the earlier you are, the better this flat damage is. But in early game, you don't need to be super picky. Just look for anything that buffs your damage. Any of these are pretty good. So that's the weapon. Now for everything else, we're going to be looking for survivability because we are a melee class, and even if we try to play range sometimes, you're going to have to play melee eventually. So it's really important to have survivability. So for this, what you're looking for is max life. So you can see my helmet has max life. That's what we're looking for there. And plus stats I think is okay. So Monk can use all 3 stats in my opinion early game. So Monk naturally uses dexterity and intelligence. Those are 2 main stats for Monk. So getting those will always be decent. However, getting strength is also okay in my opinion because strength is max HP. So every 1 point of strength is 2 points of max HP. So for the early game, when we're just looking for as much survivability as we can, strength is acceptable as well. So all stats acceptable. Max HP on your equipment is really, really good. You can see high number max HP helmet, high number max HP amulet. And there's other forms of survivability too. These come in the forms of armor, evasion, and energy shield. So, if you have any item that has a high number of any of those in the early game, you can always, go ahead and just use those. So for this body armor that I have, we have a high number in energy shield, high number max life, and a couple resistances, so pretty solid stats all around, right? But the most important ones we're looking for early game are the non-resistances. It's the max life, the armor, the energy shield, because those are the ones that will keep you alive. Energy shield is just a shield that goes above your HP bar. It's basically your HP. Some things can bypass it, such as poison and a couple other things, but for the most part, it's an extension of your HP, so that's why you're looking for that as well. Rings are normally going to have more damage, so for the rings, you're looking for the plus physical damage. The more of those, the better as well. So that one, physical damage. This one, you can see physical damage. Gloves, really more of the same. Max life. Gloves can have +1 to skills, so if you see that, that is really, really good on gloves. But if you don't, it's fine. You can just look for any damage modifier, any max life modifier as well. I happen to have a really high armored legendary belt that I found, but belt, if you can't find any good ones, it's no big deal. If you can find some with the relevant stats, even better. And lastly, boots. So boots, I think move speed is super, super important. There are a lot of bosses with AoE abilities where even if you dash dodge, you can't dodge out of it unless you dodge super, super early. So the move speed actually really helps in terms of just dodging all the annoying abilities that the bosses have. Not to mention not getting stuck in packs of mobs. So always keep an eye out for move speed. I think move speed is really important to look out for on your boots as well. So yep, those are basically what you should be looking for your equipment in order to have as good of a time as possible. And remember, in the early game, you're offhand, you're looking for that range enabler, right? So some kind of range spell or a crossbow or whatever you find that does the most amount of damage for the ranged auto attack equivalent. So yeah, that is the equipment. And now let's cover the passive tree real quick. Now, I saw a couple other like monk guide videos, and a lot of people are kind of just like dumping like all their points in this area, kind of like overlapping, going all over the place, getting as many of these points as possible. I kind of personally feel like that's a little inefficient. So my route, the route that I liked here, is taking a look at the big picture. We're basically beelining as far to the right of the skill tree as we can here, okay? And the reason for that is because you are eventually going to want to get to this node. This is the quarterstaff node. Every single ability here buffs something relevant with your quarterstaff, and this is going to be very important in the late game for most of the monk invoker stuff. So you're going to want to get here eventually. But on top of that, there's more nodes that are important there. So I started on the bottom side. This is all evasion and energy shield stuff. So if you're going to start here, you should favor the evasion and energy shield stuff. You can also start the top side for more damage if you don't want the evasion energy shield stuff. That's perfectly fine too, but it's going to take you a couple more extra points to get to the far right side, which is where I think all the invoker monks will need to go. Now, a couple nodes that are really important to point out here. So I went into the move speed node and then I started traveling downwards. This one, really nice move speed, mana regen, dex int, just a lot of stuff that kind of just helps you overall survive and mana regen is really nice quality of life, so you don't have to spam the mana potion as much. One really important node for early game is the taste for blood here. So gain 5 life per enemy killed, and then gain 20 on the primary node. So altogether, that's 30 extra HP per enemy killed. And when you're earlier, when you're in Act 1 and your HP is much lower, these are going to be amazing because your life is going to be like 100 life, 200 life, 300 life, right? So killing a pack of 10 mobs basically will full heal you every time. So these 3 nodes, amazing early game, amazing in Act 1. Highly recommend you get these in Act 1 because they will keep you alive if you have to melee. If it's the difference between having to dodge back every single auto attack, dodge, auto attack, dodge, auto attack, dodge. It's actually going to allow you to kind of man mode, right? Once you have these, you can just drop a bell on a pack of mobs. You can go strike it, and you can actually just man fight it because you're going to be killing them and life stealing faster than they can kill you. So the life steal nodes really good in the early game. I took them off once I stopped needing as much healing once I got to around the end of Act 2, but for the early game these are amazing. Another very relevant node to look at here is the blinding strike node. So this one you would basically take 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 4 extra points, but you do get 10, 10, and 24% extra increased attack damage. Now, increased attack damage is not like crazy OP, and I am not actually a PoE 1 player, but to my knowledge, there's 2 types of increased attack. There's more and there's increased. Now, more is more valuable than increased attack damage. However, when you're in the start of the game, increased attack damage is actually quite good because this is I believe it's additive damage, but when you have no increased attack damage whatsoever, the first bits of increased attack damage actually add quite a bit. They actually help a lot. And the more you have, the less valuable it becomes, right? So at the start of the game, if you just have a little bit, if you just have this 44% increase in attack damage, that will ramp your damage up quite significantly. And for 4 points, if you find yourself needing more damage, that is a really, really good set of nodes to take. All right, now moving on here, we have, we're just gonna, other than that, we're gonna keep beelining through. We're gonna keep beelining through. And eventually you will get to the nodes with the quarterstaffs. So I think for most quarterstaff builds, you're eventually going to take all of these. Right now, I'm not using too many power charges. I'm using more of a bell plus lightning strike combo like I mentioned earlier. So I didn't take the power charge one yet. I will be taking this later, but I'm taking a lot of the staff buff ones: critical hit chance, critical hit damage, attack speed. But another couple notes that are pretty important that I wanted to mention actually, and the reason why I have not finished taking all of these notes is because I think these notes are even more important early game. So another node that we want to really take advantage of is the Coming Calamity. This one is super valuable for Invoker Monk. 50% increased damage while you are affected by your Herald. You get the Herald skill pretty early in Act 1. So, this is 50% extra elemental damage. I think for Invoker Monk, a majority of your damage is your elemental damage. So no matter which Herald you're using, this is a huge increase in damage. Super, super important you get this one as early as possible. I would actually say after you get the Herald, this is the #1 priority that you want. And then, the quarterstaff is the #2. And one more honorable mention here, right under the Coming Calamity and the Herald Talents, is this cluster over here, which is just more critical hit damage, more critical hit chance. As melee, you don't get nearly as much time to kind of hit the bosses as the range classes do. So you really need good damage in order to make the fight not last so long that you just run out of potions and lose. If you do find yourself running out of potions and just slowly losing, and the fight takes like 10 15 minutes, that's when you don't have enough damage. That's when you need to upgrade your weapon. You need to look at these damage tiers if you don't have them. So this is critical hit damage, chance, and all that shebang. So I'm looking to max this one out too, and I think this one will be pretty good to have early as well. So, yeah, that is my quick TLDR and the nodes of relevance for your passive skills. And lastly, I'm going to show you guys just a little bit of gameplay here so that you can kind of see what I was doing early game for some of the boss fights. So first clip is just really cookie cutter. This is when you only have your melee attack, right? So right now I only have melee attack. I have my, palm for power charge generation, and I have falling thunder. So this is super early game, and super early game, you're gonna need to auto attack, auto attack. Actually, let me show you. Here we go. Let me show you the clip. All right, so super early game here. Um, and all we have is auto attack. Unfortunately, in this case, you're just going to need to auto attack, dodge, auto attack, dodge, auto attack, dodge, right? Like this is your super cookie cutter early game combo. Dodge the spells, auto attack, dodge, auto attack, dodge. If you see an opening, you can do like a falling thunder slam dodge, falling thunder slam dodge as well. But that's your early game stuff. Now, once you get a little bit more into the thick of it, and for a lot of the early game bosses, a lot of these early game Act 1 bosses actually have summoning phases where they summon minions at regular intervals. And for that, you can actually, get your power charges off of their summons. So this will help a lot in the early game for extra damage on your falling thunder strike. So you can see here that we're going through a minion phase, and I'm using the minions that the Devourer summons in order to max out my power charges. Right? I'm actually not killing them all. I'm just using them to get my power charges, and with the charges, I'm gonna do my Falling Thunder, Empowered Slam, and I'm gonna go back to farming power charges on his minions. Um, and this way you can kind of get your Falling Thunder to actually do the damage it's supposed to do. Otherwise, it does no damage, and these bosses take freaking forever if you don't farm the power charges off of the minions that it's summoning in the early game. So most bosses do end up summoning these little minions, whether they be maggots, zombies, wolves. Most bosses do summon them. So if they do, make sure to take advantage of that. Make sure to farm your power charges and use the full slam on the boss with all the empower charges in order to get through as fast as possible. Um, and one more clip that I have to show you guys is just a little bit more of the early game. Here I found a staff with a ranged auto attack to replace my melee auto attack, and you can kind of see I do, empowered slam, and then I can just go ahead and use the ranged auto attack to lower them, and then I can dash in to get my power charge and then back out. And this is a lot safer than going in and meleeing all of them, right? I'm keeping myself at a distance. I'm farming the power charges, and I don't have to go in. I just ping them down with the ranged auto attack and farm the charge, and then AoE the rest of them down with the big AoE. So that kind of playstyle helped me a lot. It kept me much, much safer, and I was much less likely to die when I was doing this kind of playstyle early game. So I hope all of this was able to help you guys a little bit. Those were the things that helped me the most get through early game as Monk, which I admit was a little bit of a struggle. If you guys need any help in seeing how I cleared any of the bosses, I've actually posted my boss fights. Every single boss fight in Act 1 has been uploaded on my YouTube, so you can just search the name of the boss to see how I fought the boss and beat it. I'm going to try to do the same with Act 2 and 3. I have a lot of Act 2 bosses also uploaded, and where it's everything else is going to be a work in progress as well. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.